help them just to continue to move it forward. So love you, Lord. Thank you again what you're going to do in advance. You're such a good God. Amen.
And the flag salute, Kelly Nemechek. We don't have a flag here, but I've got it on my phone. Kelly?
Okay, are we ready?
We're ready.
All right, here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Happy dollars. Any happy dollars? Connie?
I just don't have it. I'll get it. I will get it out. It's so good to see everybody, and I just want to thank Katie and Jennifer for the goodie bags that y'all did.
Peggy?
I just got to have y'all because all of us got together again.
Bob?
I'm happy too, Mike, because we're all back together.
All right.
Hey.
Bob?
Happy that we're together and happy that we're going to have a rally here 21st and 25th of June.
All right. In person. Bill?
One, well, how about two? One, that I'm here because we're going to be in Texas today. And then two for prayer because that's what this is. So thank you for always being available to do prayer. And I'll pass this around.
So you need people to sign up for the vacancies on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not a bunch, but it's an opportunity to meet together.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
And Jennifer or Katie, do you want to tell us about the swag bags?
So this year, since we haven't really been able to have our normal fellowship activities, we decided to use some of our budget and get everybody some Rotary things because not everybody has Rotary things, and something fun and hopefully makes you smile a little bit. So you should find some things inside the bag, and if you know of anybody that's not planning on coming to the in-person meetings, let me know because we're going to try to get their bags to them. So that would kind of be good. That way I won't keep bringing them to all the meetings. But I'll keep bringing it for the next 2 or 3 meetings to try to get everybody.
Jane?
I have several happy dollars. Well, one of them is for Michael Ridgway. Thank you for stepping in this morning. I woke up on Sunday morning with a scratchy throat and fluid in my ears. I thought it was allergies, but it's still with me despite allergy medicine. I don't have a fever, so I felt like I could be here, but it's 1 week with relaxed masking stuff and I'm already not feeling well. But my other one is for David Imey. Our program this morning is not David Imey, for those of you on Zoom. Pat Hall is going to be here. Pat, thank you for another happy dollar for Pat stepping in at the last moment. Thank you so much. But David Imey, Michael Ridgway, Jack Beller, thank you so much for all your help over the weekend and trying to make this happen on a fairly short notice. So as well as the Sergeant at Arms team and coming in early to set up. Thank you so much. It's a little bit of normal here. So that's what my happy dollars are for. Thank you all.
I've got $1. I'm not going to call it a happy dollar, but I've got $1 to commemorate the fact that this year, more than ever in the past, I've seen messages from people about the significance of Memorial Day, that the expression have a happy Memorial Day is not necessarily appropriate. that Memorial Day, the purpose of it is to remember those who served and lost their lives and did not come home to their loved ones. And so it's a somber time. It's a respectful time. It's a time for honoring those who made the ultimate sacrifice. And so I guess I'm happy that that message was reinforced so many times and in so many different ways this year. So anything else from anybody? Any announcements, any other announcements before we get into today's program? Today's program, Pat Hall is a super interesting guy. And I would say that he needs no introduction, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce him anyway. Pat he has more than 35 years experience as executive director and chief executive of two large not-for-profit organizations, president of his own consulting company, and owner of a clothing store. He is the president and partner in the Capital Group, a multifaceted consulting group that specializes in government relations, political campaign management, communications, board and media relations, and not-for-profit association management. Formed another consulting firm with veteran Republican legislator Jim Dunlap to form Majority Plus LLC. Together, they're co-hosts of a weekly Cox Communications political TV show called Inside the Issues. And if you've ever had the opportunity to watch it, you know that you're in for a treat today. Pat has owned the Lady Austin's clothing stores in Altus, Oklahoma. He was previously the executive director of the OPEA, Oklahoma Public Employees Association, previous CEO of the Oklahoma Democratic Party, president of the Carl Albert Foundation, member of the U.S. Army Military Police Corps. Thank you, Pat, for your service. Obtained the rank of captain. He's got a master's degree in public administration from OU and a BS in education from Southwest Missouri University. And probably his greatest asset is his wife, Melanie, who's a delightful woman, and you can tell her that I said that.
Just because she regulates you.
That's right. Yeah. Anyway, please welcome Pat Hall.
Actually, when Michael called the other day, I thought he was going to talk to me about a legal shield issue that we still have to resolve. Piece of legislation from last year. The bio, you can tell when you're ending maybe the end of a career. I've now spent 41 years at the Oklahoma State Capitol, and why I have no idea. I promised Michael I would tell the truth today about what's going on in Oklahoma, what's going on at the Oklahoma State Capitol. For 16 years, I was head of the Public Employees Association. I was a labor organizer. I was a lobbyist then. For 4 years, I was head of the Oklahoma Democratic Party, president of the Carl Albert Foundation. For 20 years, I made a difference. For the last 20 years, I've made a great living representing people like Jack Beller for many, many years and the medical doctors. I've got about 24 lobbying clients I work for. One of them, my pro bono group, is the Assistance League. We have a bill for 3 years that's still sitting on the governor's desk. For 41 years, I've always said every piece of legislation I've worked on is for the kids. Truly, Operation School Bill is for the kids. It may be the first time I didn't lie about who I was representing. When I represent the doctors, I always tell them it's for the kids. So the knee fixer back there, he's trying to figure that one out. But we have a bill on the governor's desk. It's one of only 4 bills he has not signed or vetoed or pocket vetoed, and we don't understand why. Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and Norman assistance leagues have been purchasing clothes for years and years and years for, we don't call them underprivileged anymore, we call them underserved communities, and they've been paying sales tax. And so several years ago, they came to me prior to COVID and asked if I would work on a bill I said, sure, that I have the Innocence Project as a pro bono group along with my Republican partner. I've had several pro bono groups over the year, but Operation School Bell should have been one of the easiest bills I've ever had to pass. It's taken 3 years to get there. The fiscal impact is less than $30,000 per year. They'll throw millions at other issues, and we can't get this bill done. So we're hoping that today or in the very near future, the governor will sign it. We're really, this is kind of a centennial for a lot of sad things. So talking about Michael and Memorial Day, it's a centennial for the Tulsa Massacre. It's a centennial for the Reign of Terror. On our TV show, we were fortunate enough to have the chairman, State Senator Kevin Matthews, on as our last show of the year to really talk about the Reign of Terror and what's going on at the Tulsa Massacre. Things are changing up there. The community, if you've not been to Greenwood in many, many years, you wouldn't know Greenwood. It's changing so quickly. Then certainly we have the everything going on in Pawhuska and that area on the Reign of Terror. So we have two issues that have been under the surface for, well, almost 100 years that are coming up. Let me talk about the 2021 legislative session and try to be as kind and nonpartisan as I can be. And it's not about Republicans and Democrats. It's really about the quality of people that are up there. Many of them are very educated, but once they walk into 23rd and Lincoln, they're taking stupid pills. And there's no other way to put it. It's an unbelievable thing. It's a reign of terror at the Oklahoma State Capitol. They're passing laws today of people they're mad at. They're passing laws today for solutions that have no problem. Let me just give you, if you would have told me in February, and we start the first Monday in February and we end technically by the Constitution the last Friday in May at 5 p.m. and it's called sine die, the Latin term, we got to get out of here. I think the animals wrote that with, we got to get out of this place, and it's sine die. So they have sine died and they've gone home back to their whatever their other occupations are, or to start running already for re-election, which isn't until they file in April of 2022, and then the primaries are in June, and the runoffs, and then the general election in November. So they're starting a lot earlier today. But the Capitol started off with a unbelievable fight that started and is continuing today, and that fight is mask versus non-mask. If you would have told me, representing the medical doctors for 20 years, and medical professionals, that masking would become a partisan issue and would become literally a demarcation line at the Oklahoma State Capitol, I would have told you that's not going to happen. Reasonable, educated people are going to believe that if you wear a mask, and Dr. Fauci and others have said this, CDC, but it turned ugly quick. And then when vaccinations came on board, it even turned uglier. The whole fight at the Capitol today, we fast forward to preemptions of cities. And for those of you that don't really know this, the dirty little secret is Norman is disliked tremendously at the Oklahoma State Capitol. It's been disliked for decades. It doesn't matter who serves down here, if it was Senator Lee Kate, if it was Senator Gary Gardenhire, opposite parties, or Cal Hobson. There's a lot of jealousy of Norman at the Oklahoma State Capitol, and a lot of jealousy at the University of Oklahoma. One of those reasons is the allegation, and it's true, that the OU and OSU foundations have $1 billion each. Why don't they spend some of that money? Almost all of that money at both those foundations are actually directed by donors and can't be used for other purposes except for as the donors did. So when Norman did the mandatory mask first, Norman became a target, and then God bless the mayors Bynum in Holt of Tulsa and Oklahoma City, and others that started doing mandatory mask mandates. Almost every day at the Capitol, there was rumors that a bill was going to be introduced, or a governor's executive order would be to try to override those mask mandates and open up Oklahoma to quote unquote business. Fast forward to today, the last law that was passed, and it's already been signed into law, not only prohibits cities and others from mandating masks in many certain occasions, except for private sector churches and the other things that we've also been able to regulate weapons at. is that they have prohibited mandatory mask wearing at any public facility, school, etc. They've also prohibited any entity of government from mandating vaccinations is a qualification for entry, unless you've got a medical reason. So that means you can have any reason not to wear a mask and not to have vaccinations in Oklahoma. And it's become one of the most partisan issues that you really have seen. Has nothing to do with taxation. I mean, it is even surpassed abortion as the biggest fight at the Oklahoma State Capitol between the left and the right. It's gotten to the point that we had a state senator stand up on the floor of the state Senate, fairly educated person, speaks several languages, got up and said, the government is stupid. Doctors don't know what they're talking about, and my voters know what they're talking about. We've got to get rid of these vaccinations mandates. And this was a very educated state senator. It was just purely pandering to a certain element of his voters. Why? Because they're vocal. I mean, that's why they're pandering to these people. I mean, we had rallies at the Capitol this year. The Capitol was shut down for months. We could get in, if the lobbyists and people that work there, we could all get in. They're not going to ban the lobbyists from Capitol. Otherwise, how would they have dinner? If they banned us, they couldn't go have cocktails after work and couldn't eat dinner. So they're not about to ban us. They're going to let us in the Capitol. And I represent everything from the State Medical Association to American Airlines. And I also represent some labor groups. I represent the American Federation of Teachers, and I represent elevator unions, which are a fascinating group. You know, I mean, they're 98% of all elevator installers and mechanics in the United States are union. I mean, people don't realize that until you kind of start looking through who's building what, who's repairing what in Oklahoma today. So what I really want to talk about, and I'll answer any question, I'm fairly blunt. I mean, after 41 years out there, I'm one of the 3 deans of the Capitol, so I can get away with a lot more. What are they going to do, send me home? I mean, okay, send me home. I'll find something else to do. But my Republican partner and I, we've been together 17 years, had this partnership, and it has worked perfectly. I mean, it has worked. I know his family very well. He knows my family very well. For those of you that know my wife, I'm married to a flaming liberal. And my partner's wife is a flaming conservative. And it's just fascinating, but we don't talk about those things. That's not what we do. But Jim and I determined that there's 4 C's, really 3 C's, and my wife added the 4th, that's lacking at the Oklahoma State Capitol today. Number 1, it's courage. It's courage because they're so worried about the next election and how much it's going to cost. When I first got into politics in 1980, a race around the state in Norman and Oklahoma City and Tulsa and a few of the metropolitan areas are a little more expensive. But an average state house race, you could run for $20,000. You could run for a Senate seat for about $75,000. You could run for Congress in less than $500,000. Today, if you want to be governor of the state of Oklahoma, you have to have a minimum of $5 to $6 million accessible to you in order to run. If you want to run for House District 44 or 45, the core Norman areas, it's going to cost you about $150,000 just to run for the Oklahoma House of Representatives. To run for the state Senate, it's $500,000 and up. To run for Congress, $2.5 million up. I have people, I've run, not on my bio anymore, but I ran campaigns for years. I was Drew Edmondson's campaign manager, consultant for every AG race. John Wetzel, Sheriff of Oklahoma County, for 20 years was my client. Now he's a business partner. He and I own a company together, and he's doing great. And the list just goes on and on. An old high school classmate of Jack's, he's doing fine. But to campaign today, they're so worried about it. And the main reason is term limits. The people of Oklahoma, in their wisdom, decided that we needed to throw the Democrats out, put the Republicans in. The only way to do it, and the mastermind of it all, was my good friend Tom Cole. He's a genius politically, and they determined that if they were ever going to get power, they had to do a constitutional amendment on term limits. It sounded real good to the voters. Let's throw the bums out, except my bum. Let's throw them out, and we threw them out. And term limits just means you're constantly, like a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, you never stop running for re-election. And that's been the damnation, basically, of government in Oklahoma today. This year, believe it or not, no fights. They had $9 billion to spend. $9 billion, not as much as the Chickasaw Nation, but close. Yeah, they had $9 billion, so there was no fights over money this year. There were fights over ideology. There weren't fights really over money, which is unusual. In fact, usually if the legislature has no money, it's easier because they tell everybody no. When they have money, everybody wants a piece of the pie. And there's some good things that have happened out at the Capitol this year. For those of you that have paid any attention, a lot of people think it was a waste of money, but they increased the film rebate to $40 million. And why did they do that? Because the film and music industry in Oklahoma is almost $1 billion a year industry, supplanting others. It'll never supplant agriculture, oil, and gas. But what it will do is it will creep up into the top 10 or the top 5. And if you look at what they've done with the old Cox Business Center or what they're doing around the state or what they're doing with the flowers of the August Moon, I mean, not August Moon, but the Killer Moon, if you look at what they're doing up there, there is not a motel room, a trailer park, a rental house, a room available for 50 miles around Pawhuska. It's just unbelievable what's happened. Now, we started off the legislative session, the first TV show we did, and it was not a joke because we knew the backstory. We decided to interview a guy from Lane, Oklahoma named J.J. Humphreys, representative in a second term, a retired probation parole officer. And he is the one that had the hunting license for Bigfoot. And that got all of the attention to start the legislative year before mask and vaccinations knocked it off. Everybody in the world thought it was just a joke. It was no joke. He didn't want you to really hunt Bigfoot because it's a felony if you kill Bigfoot. And we made that very clear. If you kill Bigfoot, it's a felony. And now, if you take photos of it, he has got some people down around Hoochie Town in that area that have put up a $100,000 bounty. There's a film company that will pay you $1 million for photo or for the capture of Bigfoot. And again, Bob, it really is a myth. I'm just if you're getting excited about the money, it really is a myth. But he determined, and he acts like he's just dumber than a sack of rocks, but he determined that if they would get that type of PR and publicity down to Southeast Oklahoma, one of the poorest areas of the state, that they could transform that in tourism. Well, the lieutenant governor picked it up. The wildlife department didn't want to have anything to do with it, but they have had requests from all over the world for hunting licenses for Bigfoot as a souvenir. They actually have tours now all in that part of the area in Pushmataha County looking for Bigfoot. So that was a positive. That was a positive. It sounded like a joke from what was perceived as just a laid back good old boy, but he knew exactly what he was doing. And the tourism trade down in Southeast Oklahoma, because the pandemic has just flourished. But here are the 4 C's are lacking. They're lacking courage. They're absolutely lacking civility. When I started at the Capitol, it was not unusual for a Democrat and a Republican to be best friends, go to dinner, go to lunch, families know each other, even go on vacations today. For years, my Republican partner and I we would put dinners together and we would invite a Republican and a Democrat and make them invite 2 other people, but it had to be of the opposite party. So the Democrat had to invite 2 Republicans to dinner and the Republican had to invite 2 Democrats. We couldn't do that today. They wouldn't go. They just wouldn't go. They're spending more of their time in decorum. If you read Lostogle or some of these other non-traditional communication devices, they're actually out looking at this and talking about some of the lack of civility at the Capitol. I mean, the gavel is coming now more and more on name calling. Democrats are involved in it as well. The Republicans have a supermajority, so they're going to be. When the Democrats had a supermajority, they didn't let the Republican bills be heard either. Now the Democrat bills aren't being heard. It's just power goes to the majority and not to the minority. But it's just the civility part. So they're lacking courage because they're so afraid of offending certain elements, especially the vocal minority. I mean, for those of you on either side of the abortion issue, we have a abolitionist caucus now at the Oklahoma State Legislature. They ran on only one issue, to abolish abortion. They didn't run on public education. They didn't run on medicine. They didn't run on roads, which are the traditional three things you run on. They ran on making it a felony, a criminal act for abortion. They'll vote on other business issues, and that's not the only thing they'll vote on, though. But now there's up to 14 members of the state Senate out of 48. 14 of them have formed this caucus that only looking at social issues and not looking at financial issues or public financing or public education or higher ed. Give you an example of some of the dumb, so you're lacking courage, you're lacking some civility, they're lacking courtesy. I mean, just the simple things of being courteous to each other is really started to lack. And there are youth tours, there are children's tours in high school and tours at the Capitol. They're back now in full force. They were gone for about 3 months, but the last month they opened back up. And you really don't want them to see some of the things that are going on up there. Social media has caused a lot of the problems. We all know that. If you've ever run a campaign, you're involved in social media. You can say anything you want. You can pretty much get away with it. So there's a lot of social media that we have lacked. We're lacking an organized press at the state capitol. When I first went out there, there was AP, UPI, Daily Oklahoman, Oklahoma City Times, Tulsa World, Tulsa Tribune. I mean, we had Norman Transcript would not print. Some of us remember they wouldn't print a bad story on the front page. There were no murders, wrecks, or anything. But the Norman Transcript had a great paper. The Journal Record had one of the best political sections of any paper. They're all lacking up there. There is no full-time TV bureau at the Capitol. There's no full-time radio bureau at the Capitol anymore. Used to be you'd have 3 television stations, 4 or 5 radio, and about 10 to 15 newspapers. They're all gone. There's the Daily Oklahoma, the Tulsa World, and then some stringers, Non-Doc, and some other Frontier, and some other ones, Oklahoma Watch, that are trying to fill that gap. The fourth one is really compassion that's just lacking. A lot of just straightforward thinking on what's going on, and a couple of examples of that. Of course, the preemptions that are going on. We don't want the federal government to tell us what to do, but by damn, the cities better not go out on their own and do anything. So it's really become a tussle. And Oklahoma City and Tulsa and Norman and Lawton have really become closer. And then the 5th one in that group is Stillwater that's working with them. Enid will be the 6th one. And some of them are just real traditional Republican bases like Enid. So, and then Bartlesville will come in as well. And what do Enid and Bartlesville have in common? Big oil and gas and really educated populations. So they're going to come into that. So they're lacking some compassion out there, and that is caring about children. We always say it's for the kids, and it's really it's not. It's really for the dollar. What's driving the economy. But a couple of bills, just to give you an example that you probably didn't hear about, that didn't make it to the end zone because they were stopped by lobbyists, basically. And one of them deals with Oklahoma's Promise, which is really one of the very best things that could have ever come out of the Oklahoma State Capitol for families able in the junior year of their students to start signing them up for Oklahoma's Promise, where they literally have some benchmarks that if they have to financially need the money, but the benchmarks, if they do these things in community colleges, universities, or colleges, their tuition will be paid for. Unfortunately, their books, fees, and food and lodging will not be paid for, but tuition will be paid for. This year, it came from a really reasonable senator from Edmond who said, we have to change OLAP, and we have to change it from a promise to a promissory note. So if you don't complete your education in 6 years, we're going to claw back that money from you. And it was really contentious at the Capitol. I mean, Superintendent Joey Hoffmeister was really the biggest advocate out there. And I represent the University of Central Oklahoma. So we were just beyond ourselves because if you tell a student that at the end of 6 years, and there's extenuating circumstances. I have a partner in another business who owns a farm out in Sentinel. He was an honor student at OSU. I was an honor student. Yes, Your Honor. No, Your Honor. But that's a whole nother story. I asked him one day, I said, Luke, if you in your junior year, if your dad would have had a heart attack, what would you have done? Oh, I had no choice. I would have had to drop out of college and go back and run the farm. He said, I would have hoped to graduate it someday, but I wouldn't, there was no question about it. I couldn't have stayed in college and counted on my grandmother or my mother to run the farm. And it's now he probably wouldn't have qualified for all that, but let's say it was a smaller farm. And or the young woman that gets pregnant, or the one that has an accident, or now the ones that get deployed, I always get asked this question. Ones get deployed, they're taken care of. If, the military, I mean, when you return with full benefits. And then the other one was they're mad at the hospitals. They're mad at the hospitals for Medicaid expansion, for hospitals taking the lead to vote, and the people of Oklahoma voted for Medicaid expansion. They're not mad at the marijuana industry. They pass bills for them all the time, but they're mad at the hospitals. So this year they did a whole thing on managed care. I represent the doctors. We sued, the nurses sued, the dentists sued, the pharmacists sued, the hospital sued. There's about 10 of us in a coalition that we've all sued the government to try to force them to stop doing what we believe was an illegal act, and that was allowing agencies to spend money without authorization from the legislature. It's so I tell you all this not to depress you ever even more, but the answer to this is for people to run for public office, and it's not fun to run for public office. I mean, we have a young man in town, Jacob Rosecrans, first Democrat to win that precinct, and since Vicky White many years ago. How'd he do it? He knocked every door. He didn't care if you were Republican, Democrat, Independent, he knocked every door. And that's how you're going to do it, Republican or Democrat. You're going to have to do it. Jack's put his name on a ballot. He knows what it's like to go up to that door with a mad dog out there or mad kid. It's tough. It's tough. And they have to raise the money. They have to worry about social media. They have to go to their spouse. And they have to tell them what they're doing because they're going to put their children, everybody in jeopardy. I mean, it's just a tough road, but we need qualified people of either party to go to the Capitol. I mean, right now, Republicans are going to win. We're very much of a red state. Are we getting redder? No, we're actually not getting redder. I don't know how much redder we could get. We're not getting it any more red, but we have pockets of purple popping up. In Lawton, there's a big pocket of purple. Tulsa, Midtown, all of Midtown, there's big pockets of purple. But what will happen is the rural people, the biggest fight at the Capitol today isn't R&D because the R's run the Capitol. Biggest fight today is rural versus urban. I mean, that's what you're going to continue to see. But that fight's been there forever. But forever, the rural legislators ran the Oklahoma State Capitol. And they're not running it as much as they used to today. Today, it's becoming suburban and urban with a pocket, just a little bit of pocket of rural, but they've had to dip into suburban areas to have enough voters to meet the qualification to win the next election. Otherwise, in redistricting, what's going to happen, there will only be 2 senators literally from El Reno to the border, from Texas to Kansas. There will only be 2 state senators in that whole area because of the lack of population in Western Oklahoma. It's decreasing. Canadian County is bursting at the seams. Choctaw, a little sleepy town, is getting their own state rep because it's just bursting at the seams. So Cleveland County won't get another rep or another senator. We'll be right where we are. They'll be a little more compact. Congressman Cole, it's a real problem where he's going to go because you've got Congresswoman Bice. She's got to get out of core Oklahoma City. She needs to get more suburban, and she would like to come south. The problem, that's where Tom Cole's house is. That's where he lives. And so for her to come south, it's a little problematic for Tom. Frank Lucas represents 1/3 of the state already. His is going to get bigger. His area is going to get bigger because we're going to keep 5 members of Congress. And again, I just look at, all of these different things. At the last moment, we now have a highway named for President Trump. It's not much. It's in the panhandle. But you know, the trade-off that was actually they had to suspend the rules at the last moment to do it. We have any of you that understand transportation, we have an 8-year plan that was put into place to stop Senator Stipe, the evil Senator Stipe, who actually would go in and try to build roads in southeast Oklahoma for his people. And this 8-year plan has never been touched till this year because allegedly, and I say allegedly on this, the governor's still mad at the Chickasaw Nation. So he took Highway 9 and took it off the 8-year plan. And if any of you, I live right off Highway 9. Thank God I live to the east of Highway 9 and not west. But any afternoon, that traffic's not just casino traffic trying to get on Highway 9 and go to all those new areas in Blanchard and even Norman area. So that's off the 8-year plan. The Chickasaws were willing to put $10 million into that. It was federal money, but it was going to go into it. But because of some anger still over the gaming issues, that didn't happen. And I know my time is getting short, and I'd really open it up to any questions. As I said, one of the things, 2 things that happened good besides the film rebate was we actually were able to get telemedicine in. For the pandemic proved that telemedicine's here to stay for primary care doctors, pediatricians, and others. It's here to stay, especially for behavioral science, psychiatrists, psychologists. We only have 5 child psychiatrists in the state of Oklahoma. It's a tragedy. It's an accident looking for a place to happen. But if you can do more of the counseling type things on telemedicine, we had to fight the insurance industries, but we won. That was a real good one. The other one was real good. It's real boring, as the author of the bill, the House author said. It was the least sexiest bill in the world since 1982. The Personnel Reform Act for state government has never been touched. They totally redid it this year with the labor group sitting at the table, working with the legislature. Finally came up with a good plan. I don't mean to be that negative about it. I guess I'm just cynical. I've earned it. To be honest with you, that Capitol's taken a hip and a knee with those marble floors. So I wear tennis shoes with suits, and they've sent a new trend out there. How these ladies these young lobbyists come out there and still in high heels, thinking that it's something. They don't last. They don't last. Poor little pages will come out the first week of trying to wear heels. They don't last a day. I mean, they're told to bring tennis shoes with them. So it's still a great place. There's smart people out there. They're very smart. It's just collectively they take stupid pills. And I don't know how to fix that. You have to fix it. I mean, I vote. I haven't missed an election. I try to vote more than once. I get caught every time. So truthfully, but it's, I mean, I grew up there. I started out there at 28 and almost 70. I'm still there. Why? I mean, it's exciting. Every day is different for those of you that have ever been out there and worked out that building. No 2 days are alike. No 2 minutes are alike. You don't know what's going to flare up or calm down. So I just got a couple of minutes to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
The redistricting that you were talking about, who decides that? I thought when the redistricting happened, the boundaries were already established.
No, well, there are boundaries, but population growth changed. It's a population shift. It used to be you only had to have 30,000 constituents to be in a House district. It's up to 52,000. I think it's almost 90,000 for a Senate. See, Oklahoma's actually grown a little bit. So that's good news. We didn't get our 6. And they actually did it with a bipartisan legislative commission and town hall meetings all over the state. The rural areas all attended the town hall. I don't think Norman's town halls were all that well attended, but rural town halls, I mean, they don't want to lose that federal money. You know, when you have the number of hospitals getting on the verge of bankruptcy that we have in Oklahoma, it's scary. With this managed care coming, we're going to see more hospitals collapse. We're going to see more primary care and pediatricians leaving. It happened last time managed care came. They're going to come to suburban. They're going to go to Doc in the Boxes. They're going to come and they're going to quit taking Medicaid. So they really are looking at all this federal money. And that's really what the big deal redistricting is. It's tied to money. It's tied to grants. It's tied to money. And anybody in city planning, state planning goes, this time of year, they're just neurotic because they're trying to figure out how much money they're going to get. So it's every 10 years, but the only two things the legislature must do by constitution. Every year they must balance a budget, and every 10 years they must redistrict. That's the only, they could do balance a budget the first week of session and go home. They're not going to, just for the record. Yeah, I know, wishing and hoping. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, well, you had mentioned Vice trying to get into where Tom Cole's house is.
Mhm.
So that's nothing to do with Vice or Tom Cole. It's to do with
Oh, no. No, it has nothing to do with them.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they'll try to push a member of the minority party out and they'll make them run against each other, but they didn't do that this year. One of the fairest things they did at the Capitol was redistricting. The Democrats had seats at the table too, and they're pretty happy. I mean, the Democrats are pretty happy. I mean, the Republicans don't want to come into Crown Heights in downtown Oklahoma City. They don't want to come into Core Norman. I mean, they just don't. It's like the plague for them. And you know, Republicans, I used to say Democrats didn't want to go to Nichols Hills. Nichols Hills 2 years ago was represented by a Democratic county commissioner and Democratic state rep and a Democratic state senator. So that threw my whole thinking out the window. I mean, and Norman's been represented by Republicans in 44. It's not shocking. No, it's not personalities as much as it's just raw numbers trying to make it fit. Yes.
Thank you so much for speaking. I love the 4 C's, and I think you could add a 5th one to that. You mentioned it, cynicism. And when you mentioned those 4 C's, which were courage, civility, courtesy, and compassion, when I hear you talk about the lack of those, what I'm hearing is a centralized focus on personal ego. So my question is, when did you, if you could put your finger on it, when did you see that shift from more of a public service to more of perhaps a private service? And what do you see as the solution?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think that building is all type A's, folks. The state capitol, I don't care if you're a staff member. I mean, to survive out there, you better be a type A. But the ego, when every day you're called senator and somebody takes you to lunch or somebody takes you to dinner, and then you have to go back home and mow your own lawn. And I mean, they like being at the Capitol. Not all of them, a lot of them like going home, but they come from every different profession. But to put your name on a ballot, you have to have an ego. I mean, you've got to be prepared for what's getting ready to come. So when did I first notice it? I'll tell you, in the 80s, we still had a lot of Depression era and World War II veterans, believe it or not, that were still at the Capitol. The veterans, there seems to be more veterans today than usual, and they formed a caucus to try to take care of a lot of veterans issues. I think it was when the school teachers and others, people that really didn't run for public office anymore, the retired superintendents, the farmer, that they didn't do it, and the people that started to run were ideologues. They were running on one issue, not a community issue. And I think that happened. I think the Democrats were just as much to blame in the early 90s for that. A lack of vision. The Democrats lost their vision totally. They forgot their core constituents were teachers, public education, labor, and the elderly. Those were their core. Those were their core functions. And they didn't spend enough time. They spent way too much time on helping corporations and giving tax breaks and those types of things. And that was not a Democratic core value or a Democratic core principle. If you want to vote like a Republican, be a Republican. And that's kind of what the shift was. And I'd say it started in the early 90s. And then the Republicans did a brilliant job on recruiting. They went out and recruited people who, if they ran for office, their name ID went up, even if they lost, insurance agents, real estate agents, and lawyers. That's who they recruited. It was a brilliant strategy. And if they lost the first time, the Republican Party embraced them and made them county officers and kept them embraced. We Democrats, we kicked you out. I mean, we kicked you to the curb and say, we have a big tent. You got to compete. We don't care who you are. You got to compete. And so I think that's really kind of what happened. The Democrats did it to themselves in many, many cases. I'd love to tell you I was part of the solution, not part of the problem, but I might have been part of the problem as well. I mean, we had some rose-colored glasses on. Michael put his name on a ballot and ran out there. He never would do it twice. We tried to get him to, but he wouldn't do it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Pat. That was great. I could sit here for hours listening to Pat talk. On this day after Memorial Day, I hope that we'll all keep in our minds and in our hearts every single day the thoughts and feelings about Memorial Day and the appreciation that we have for the people who have served and that we've lost. And I appreciate seeing all of you all in person. It's an important day for us. And encourage you to, what's this year's theme? Rotary creates opportunities. So let's go out there and think about what would Jonna do? And Rotary creates opportunities. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good job, bro.